Be me, name is Lauren. 34, certified diversity and inclusion consultant. Got my master's in organizational psychology back in 2016. Spent 5 years doing HR before pivoting to DI work full-time. Built my practice during that window when every company suddenly cared about this stuff. Had a solid client roster, good testimonials, thought I knew what I was doing. Then I got the Riverside Logistics contract, and everything changed. They're a regional trucking and warehouse company, about 150 employees. Mostly men, mostly blue collar, exactly the kind of place that needs intervention. Corporate headquarters brought me in after some complaints about workplace culture. My job was to run a 6-month training program on inclusive leadership. First day I show up and meet with the operations director, guy named Frank. He's 58, been with the company for 30 years, clearly skeptical but polite. Takes me on a tour of the facility, introduces me to department heads. I'm taking mental notes on everything I see. All male leadership team, photos on the walls are all men. Break room has a calendar with classic cars, very stereotypically masculine. I can already see the work that needs to be done here. Frank sets me up in a conference room for my first session. Mandatory attendance for all supervisors and team leads, about 25 people. They file in over the next 10 minutes, mostly men, a few women. I notice immediately how the men dominate the space. Taking up chairs, spreading out, talking loudly to each other. The 3 women sit together on one side, quieter, taking up less room. Classic example of gendered space-taking behavior. I start my presentation, slides about unconscious bias and microaggressions. Can feel the resistance in the room immediately. Arms crossed, guys checking their phones, couple of eye rolls. But that's normal. Resistance means you're pushing boundaries. I get to a slide about masculine communication patterns. How men tend to interrupt more, talk over others, dominate discussions. One of the guys, probably mid-40s, raises his hand. Says his name is Mike, asks if we're going to talk about women too. Or, is this just about what men do wrong? I explain that the research shows men disproportionately engage in these behaviors. That we need to focus on the dominant group's patterns to create change. Mike nods slowly, but I can tell he's not buying it. Session continues, and I'm getting minimal engagement. Try to do an exercise about identifying bias in the workplace. Ask people to share examples of times they've witnessed exclusion. One of the women, Sarah, shares about being talked over in meetings. I thank her for her vulnerability and ask the men to reflect on that. Silence, guys looking at each other, nobody's saying anything. I push harder, asking directly if any of them have ever interrupted a colleague. More silence than one guy says, yeah, probably everyone does sometimes. I correct him, tell him it's not everyone, it's predominantly men. The energy in the room shifts, gets colder. Session ends, and people file out quickly. No one makes eye contact. I tell myself that's fine. Change is uncomfortable, they'll come around. Week 2 and attendance is down. I count 18 people instead of 25. Ask Frank about it, and he says some folks had scheduling conflicts. But I can tell he's covering for them. The people who did show up are even less engaged than before. I try a different approach, personal storytelling exercise. Ask everyone to share about a mentor who shaped their career. Figure this will reveal the male-dominated networks that need disrupting. First few people give bland, safe answers. Then it's this guy David's turn. He's probably 50, warehouse supervisor. He talks about his first boss at the company, man named Joe. How Joe taught him everything, was like a second father to him. Got emotional talking about how Joe died of a heart attack 5 years ago. I see an opportunity to make a point about male emotional repression. Ask David if Joe ever talked about his health or stress levels. David looks confused, says Joe was pretty private about that stuff. I lean in, suggest that masculine norms around stoicism might have prevented Joe from seeking help or talking about what he was experiencing. That maybe if workplace culture had been different, Joe might still be here. The room goes completely silent. David's face does this thing, like he's been slapped. He stands up without saying anything and walks out. 2 other guys follow him immediately. I call after them that we need to finish the exercise. But they're already gone. The session falls apart after that, people barely participating. When it ends, Sarah, one of the women, comes up to me. She looks uncomfortable, says she thinks I should maybe ease up a little. That these guys are trying but I'm pushing too hard. I'm surprised she's saying this. I'm literally advocating for women like her. Tell her that change requires discomfort, that I'm doing this for her benefit. She gives me this sad smile and says she didn't ask me to do that. Then she leaves too, and I'm standing in an empty conference room. That night I get an email from Frank. Subject line says we need to talk about the training approach. Body of the email is professional, but the message is clear. Several employees have expressed concerns about the sessions. Feel the content is accusatory rather than educational. He wants to meet tomorrow to discuss adjusting the curriculum. I'm furious reading this. They hired me to create change. Now they're backing off the second it gets uncomfortable. I respond with research citations, articles about productive discomfort. Explain that resistance is part of the transformation process. Frank replies saying he understands, but we still need to meet. Next morning I'm in his office at 8 a.m. He's got printouts on his desk. I can see they're my session notes. Lauren, he starts, I appreciate what you're trying to do here. But I'm getting pushback from the team that I can't ignore. David filed a formal complaint about last week's session. I immediately get defensive. What I said was factually accurate. Men's reluctance to seek medical help is well documented. Frank holds up his hand. Joe didn't die because of masculinity. He died because he had an undiagnosed heart condition. David knew that, his family knew that, everyone here knew that. You took his grief and made it about your curriculum. I start to argue, but something in Frank's face stops me. He's not angry, he's disappointed, which somehow feels worse. Frank continues, I've been here 30 years, I knew Joe. He was one of the best men I ever worked with. Helped dozens of people build careers here, including women. 3 of our female supervisors got their start under Joe. But you didn't ask about any of that, you just saw a teaching moment. I feel something uncomfortable settling in my stomach. Try to refocus the conversation on the bigger picture. Tell Frank that individual examples don't negate systemic patterns. That we need to look at structures, not just personalities. He leans back in his chair, looks tired. Lauren, every single person in this company is a person. Not a case study, not a representative of their gender. When you forget that, you lose them. And I'm watching you lose them. We end the meeting with him, asking me to revise my approach. Focus less on confrontation, more on collaboration. I agree, because I need the contract, but I'm resentful about it. Spend the weekend completely redoing my curriculum. Make it softer, more palatable, exactly what I didn't want to do. Monday comes and I'm back for session 3 with my watered-down content. Only 12 people show up this time, less than half the original group. And something is different, they're all there, but they're not present. Sitting quietly, hands folded, faces completely neutral. I start my presentation and nobody reacts. No nods, no questions, no engagement at all. Try to do a group discussion about communication styles. Ask people to share their thoughts on effective workplace dialogue. Silence, everyone just looking at me blankly. I call on Mike directly, ask him what he thinks. He says, I think you're doing a great job presenting, Lauren. Thank you, but what about the question? I don't have any thoughts to share right now. Then he goes quiet again, expression completely blank. I try Sarah next, thinking maybe the women will engage. She says the same thing, basically nothing. Says she's just here to listen and learn. This goes on for 45 minutes, me presenting to stone faces. Every question met with either silence or these empty corporate responses. Nobody volunteers anything, nobody debates, nobody even seems bothered. They're just sitting there like they're watching a mandatory safety video. Session ends, and they all file out quietly. Professional, polite, and completely unreachable. I catch David in the hallway, the guy whose mentor I talked about. Ask him if he's okay after last week's session. He looks at me and says, "I'm fine. Thank you for asking." His voice is pleasant, but his eyes are dead. "David," I say, "I think we should talk about what happened." "There's nothing to talk about," he says. "I'm participating in your sessions. Attending every one. Following all the guidelines. But you're not engaging. You didn't say engagement was mandatory, just attendance." And then he walks away, leaving me standing in the hallway. I realize what's happening. They're doing malicious compliance. Showing up so they can't be written up, but refusing to actually participate. They've found a way to make me completely irrelevant. That night, I'm in my hotel room going through my notes, trying to figure out where this went wrong. I pull up the employee background forms Frank sent me at the beginning. The ones I'd skimmed quickly, because I thought I knew what I'd find. Start reading them carefully for the first time. David's form mentions his 25 years with the company. Lists Joe Martinez as his most influential mentor. Includes a note that Joe passed away in 2019. There's a whole paragraph about how Joe had created an informal mentorship program, specifically focused on helping women and minorities advance. How David had continued that program after Joe died. I feel sick reading this. Move to Mike's form, the guy who asked about bias against women. See that he's married with 3 daughters. Works second shift so he can be home when they get back from school. Under additional comments it says, volunteered to mentor female warehouse workers. Help 2 women get their CDL licenses and move into driving positions. Go through form after form finding the same pattern. These aren't the resistant, biased men I'd assumed they were. They're people with full lives and complicated histories, who I'd reduced to stereotypes to fit my framework. Next session, I try something different. Stand up in front of the group and acknowledge that I messed up. Say I made assumptions without understanding their actual experiences. That I particularly owe David an apology for what I said about Joe. The room is silent. They're all looking at me with those same blank expressions. David says, "Thank you for saying that, Lauren." His tone is polite and completely empty. I wait for more, but nothing comes. Try to continue with the actual curriculum, but it's pointless. They're not hostile, not angry, just unreachable. Like I'm speaking to them through bulletproof glass. Week 4, and I'm sitting in Frank's office again. He's got the attendance records and feedback forms in front of him. "Lauren, this isn't working. People are showing up, but nobody's getting anything out of it. I know, I admit, they've shut down completely. Because you lost their trust," he says quietly. "Frank, I apologized. I acknowledged my mistake. Some things you can't come back from. When you use David's grief as a teaching tool, you showed them who you are. Someone who sees them as problems to solve, not people to work with." His words hit harder than I expect. I try to explain that my intentions were good, that I was trying to create awareness about harmful patterns. Frank cuts me off. "You know what Joe used to say? The guy you decided died because of toxic masculinity. He'd say people don't care what you know until they know that you care. You never cared about them, Lauren. You cared about being right." We sit in silence for a minute. Then Frank says the company is ending the contract early. They'll pay me through the end of the month, but my services are no longer needed. "It's not personal," he says, "but I think we need a different approach." I pack up my materials that afternoon. Walking through the facility, one last time, I see David talking to a young woman. She's got a clipboard and he's explaining something about inventory systems. Patient, thorough, taking time to make sure she understands. He sees me watching and gives a polite nod. Nothing more, just basic courtesy. I get in my car and sit there for a long time before starting the engine. This was supposed to be a showcase contract for me. 6 months of transformation work, before and after metrics, a case study. Instead, it's a failure I'll have to hide from future clients. Drive back to my home city that evening, 3-hour drive in silence. Keep replaying moments from the past 4 weeks. Every time I pushed when I should have listened. Every time I made assumptions instead of asking questions. Every time I chose being right over being effective. Get home and pour a glass of wine I don't really want. sit on my couch, and pull up my professional website. Read the bio I wrote about myself. Lauren Mitchell specializes in transformative DI work, creating lasting culture change through evidence-based interventions, helping organizations move beyond surface-level diversity to true inclusion. Every word feels hollow now. My phone buzzes, text from my friend Christina. She does DI work too. We came up through the same program. Hey, how's the trucking company contract going? I stare at the message for a long time. Type out, really well, getting great engagement. Delete it. Type, actually, I just got fired. Delete that too. Finally, write, it's complicated, can we talk this weekend? She responds immediately with a thumbs up and a coffee emoji. I put my phone face down and close my eyes. Think about David's face when I connected his mentor's death to masculinity. About the way the whole room had gone silent. About how I'd thought that silence was resistance. When really it was grief, it was hurt, it was them realizing I wasn't safe. My laptop is still open with my case notes from the contract. All my observations about toxic masculinity and male dominance. Pages of theory and frameworks and analysis. Not a single note that treats them like actual human beings. I close the laptop and sit in my dark apartment. For the first time in my career, I don't have an explanation. That makes me the hero and them the problem. Don't have a narrative about resistance and fragility. Just the uncomfortable truth that I failed. Not because they were unwilling to change, but because I was unwilling to see them. Weekend comes, and I meet Christina at our usual coffee place. Start telling her about the contract, how it fell apart. Frame it as a story about a resistant workplace. About men who couldn't handle being challenged. Christina listens quietly, stirring her coffee. When I finish, she asks one question. Did you ever actually apologize to David? I said I acknowledged that I made assumptions. That's not an apology, she says gently. I feel defensive immediately. The point is they should have engaged with the material. Even if I made one mistake, the curriculum was solid. Christina looks at me for a long moment. Lauren, when I first started doing this work, I thought resistance was the enemy. Thought if people pushed back it meant I was doing something right. But then I realized sometimes resistance is just self-protection. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe they weren't fragile. Maybe you weren't safe. Her words sit between us like a stone. I want to argue, want to explain my methodology. But I keep seeing David walking out of that session. Keep hearing Frank say, you never cared about them. Maybe you're right, I say quietly. Christina reaches across the table, squeezes my hand. This job is hard, she says, because we're asking people to be vulnerable. But we have to be worthy of that vulnerability first. And sometimes we're not, and we have to sit with that. I leave the coffee shop an hour later feeling worse and better simultaneously. Worse because I have to accept that I was wrong. Better because at least now I know what I was wrong about. That night, I open a new document on my laptop. Title it Lessons from Riverside. Sit there staring at the blank page for 20 minutes. Finally start writing. Number 1, people are not case studies. Number 2, grief is not a teaching opportunity. Number 3, resistance might be self-protection, not fragility. Number 4, you can't create inclusion by making people feel excluded. Number 5, being right matters less than being trustworthy. I write for 2 hours, purging everything I thought I knew. All the frameworks that mattered more than people. All the theory that justified not seeing them as individuals. All the ways I prioritize transformation over trust. When I'm done, I have 5 pages of uncomfortable truths. Save it with a file name I'll probably never open again. But at least it exists, evidence that I learned something. Even if what I learned is that I had it all wrong. Month later, I'm pitching a new potential client. Manufacturing company, similar demographic to Riverside. They ask about my experience with blue-collar workplaces. I could tell them about my successful interventions. Frame Riverside as a challenging environment I navigated. Instead, I tell them the truth. Say I had a contract that ended early because I lost the trust of the employees. That I went in thinking I knew what they needed, without taking time to understand who they actually were. The HR director looks surprised, asks what I learned from it. I learned that inclusion work isn't about fixing people. It's about creating conditions where everyone can contribute. And you can't do that if people don't trust you. That trust has to be earned through listening, not lectures. She nods slowly, asks how I'd approach their organization differently. I spend the next 30 minutes outlining a strategy. That starts with listening sessions, not training modules. That treats employees as experts on their own experience. That builds on what's working instead of only highlighting what's broken. At the end, she says, "I appreciate your honesty. We'll be in touch." I walk out not sure if I got the contract or not, but feeling better about what I pitched than anything I'd done at Riverside. 2 weeks later, I get an email from Frank at Riverside. My heart sinks thinking it's a negative review or a formal complaint. Open it nervously. "Lauren," he writes, "I wanted to let you know we hired a new DI consultant. Someone who's taking a different approach, starting with listening to the team about what they need. David's been part of the planning process. Actually suggested some good ideas about mentorship programs. I thought you'd want to know the work is continuing, just in a different way." He signs it professionally, no hard feelings apparent. But I know what he's really saying. The work is happening without you because you made it about you. I close the email and sit with that for a while. Then I write back a short response. Thank Frank for the update. Say, I'm glad the work is continuing, and that I learned a lot from my time there even though it didn't end well. Hit send before I can overthink it. That evening I'm updating my website again. Delete the part about transformative interventions. Write something new instead. I partner with organizations to build cultures of genuine inclusion, starting with listening, building trust, and honoring people's experiences. Not perfect, but more honest than what was there before. My phone buzzes, email from the manufacturing company. They want to move forward with a contract. 6 months, starting with employee listening sessions. I read it twice to make sure it's real. Then I write back accepting and outlining next steps. This time I'll do it differently. This time I'll remember that before you can change a culture, you have to be part of it. And before people will be vulnerable with you, you have to prove you're safe. Anyway, that's the story of how I started mandatory diversity sessions, thinking I was going to transform a company, and ended up learning that the person who needed transforming was me. That inclusion work isn't about being right. It's about being trustworthy. And sometimes the critical mistake isn't the one you make in the moment. It's the one you make in how you see people to begin with.